right, it's time for me to do another one of my little mini series of world cinema reviews, courtesy of some discs that I've received from Kino Lorber for review purposes. This next one is called Inside the Yellow Cocoon Shell. And I have to say, this movie is presenting a little bit of a challenge to me. If you've followed my blogs and podcasts and even these video clips I've done over the years, I tend not to give negative reviews. I have a lot of respect for filmmakers, people who, work on their craft and put the effort into creating quality cinema. And I typically don't look for reviewing copies of films that are, mediocre or, just kind of throwaway type of movies. This one here is certainly not that. There's definitely some skill here and some artistic ability. This is an award-winning film at the 2023 Cannes Film Festival last year. This director, his name is Pham Thien, a Vietnamese youngish man. I don't really know a whole lot about him, but he won the Camera d'Or for this film. This is the Camera d'Or is the award given to the best debut feature. And I don't know what the competition was like, but obviously winning an award of that, significance at a, most prestigious film festival, one of the greatest in the world, that's meaningful. And this film definitely has merits. But here's the parts that challenge me. First of all, you can see this is a DVD only disc. This is the only format that is available in, at least for, North American consumption, as far as I can tell. And this is a film, obviously just made and released last year, that really relies on its visuals to, to kind of maybe even dazzle the eye a little bit. There's a lot of long, slow takes. This is a 3-hour movie set in Vietnam. I'll say a little bit more about the, the story, the narrative, and all of that. But the fact that this is only available on DVD means that you're not going to get the crisp image, high definition. The sound mix is fine. DVD is okay for sound, but it just really seems to be lacking. And I guess I understand that, fitting a 3-hour film on a disc, uses up a lot of space. But, a Blu-ray certainly could handle that and give you at least, pretty close to ideal image resolution. And this film really requires that. I feel like because there's a lot of long static takes where you're just looking at the scenery, the characters, they often have their backs to the camera. There's not a lot of motion or movement. Mostly it's slow zooms in or pans. There's no cuts to close-ups. There's maybe characters walking into the camera. I guess I should be doing that. So that's some of the visual display there. But seeing it in lower resolution, the subtitles are also kind of pixely. So that's just kind of annoying. And I don't understand why they cut that particular corner. There are also some pretty significant issues with the editing of the film, I would say, because a lot of these scenes really do stretch out well past the point of whatever action took place or whatever kind of exchange and dialogue. All of that stuff happens, and then the shot just sits there and nothing else happens. Or the shot opens with kind of a long static, tableau, and then maybe a character enters in. And honestly, I think you could have made a good 2-hour movie out of this if you just trim some of that excess off. I think what he's going for. He wants that slow, meditative pace to really let the situation sink in. I think about Pichapong Riastakul's Memoria, or really any of the stuff that he's made over the past several years. This is a film that's made in that style, and it deals with spiritual themes. I'll get to that just in a minute. But you got to make sure you can really carry the weight of these long, ponderous takes and this 3-hour commitment that is being asked of the viewer. And the other thing, too, it's got one of these kind of trendy, I guess I'm noticing, opening sequences. You don't see the title of the film inside the yellow cocoon shell until fully 30 minutes into the movie. I mean, there's an immediate opening shot. It's of a soccer game and young men athletes kind of playing soccer, and then the camera slowly moves over, and then it's all one continuous shot, but the field is apparently next to some kind of an open air cafe, which then is in turn right next to an intersection on the street in Saigon, Vietnam. And it's a pretty cool shot, just because you've got all this different life going on, and characters talking with each other, and diners in the background, and you can sort of see a lot of different interesting things happening there. That's the immediate opening of the film, and then 30 minutes later, like I say, a title screen comes on inside the yellow cocoon shell, and then it picks up the action right where it's at. And a lot of things happen from that opening scene that I just described until, boom, there's the title of the film, and then it goes away. There's no other credits, just inside the yellow cocoon shell, and then off to the rest of the story for the next 2.5 hours. It reminds me of Drive My Car, where you've got a 45-minute prologue, and then boom, Drive My Car comes on as the title. And I know there's other films that have done this as well. I think with Drive My Car, you definitely do have a prologue, and then you have the rest of the movie that justifies that 45-minute kind of build-up, if you will, before the title of the film is actually shown. This year felt a lot more arbitrary to me. Maybe I could go back and try to figure out what's the first part, the title card, and the rest of it from there. But there's nothing that seemed to me to be kind of like, this is the dividing line that sets us up for the rest of the film. So let's talk about what is Inside the Yellow Cocoon Shell about. Here's the basic plot rundown. It's about a young man, also named Thien, kind of the same middle name perhaps as the director. And he is just a young man. You can tell at the beginning of the film he has some spiritual matters on his mind. He's raising questions with his buddies about, purpose of life, and why does God allow suffering in this world, and are we destined, for heaven or hell? And he's got a couple of more cynical, skeptical guys that are kind of almost ribbing him for even asking those questions. It's like, well, who cares? What difference does it make anyways, right? So you can sort of see this is where he's at. And then very immediately following that little exchange, there's a motorcycle accident that takes place off screen. You hear this big crashing sound. You see everybody reacting to what they've just seen, and then it pans around and you see the wreckage with a couple bodies also laying on the street. One of them is a child's body, and it turns out to be the sister of this spiritual seeker, Thien, has been killed in that accident, and her son, around 4 or 5 years old, has survived it with just minor scratches and no significant injuries. So all of a sudden you've got that immediate question applied: why does God allow suffering, and why did this child survive when the adults with him did not? And it turns out that the son's mother, who's passed away, the father of the boy, her husband, partner, whatever he was, he had also split out a long time ago, some years ago. And so all of a sudden, you've got this young man, Thien, who has sort of inherited this child, this kindergarten-aged boy. And, he's got to figure out where to go and what to do, because he's not really equipped to raise this boy himself. And so he's got to make a journey both with the mother's body in a casket and the boy back to the hometown, and figure out where things go from there, and possibly try to connect with this man who was the child's father, and see if he might be able to take an interest in bringing this boy up. So he embarks on this journey from the city of Saigon up into the hills, up into the kind of the highlands of Vietnam. And there's also a little bit of a dialogue at the beginning talking about the difference between those who live in the city and those who move up to the hills, the more rustic or primitive part, if you will, of Vietnam. Not like, caveman primitive, but people living in much more rudimentary conditions than what you see down in the city. And so this film has a lot to do with Vietnamese Catholicism And so you think about the effect of French colonialism on the Vietnamese culture, which I know nothing of as far as native Vietnam and what that was like prior to the French, invasion and conquest. I sort of have a vague understanding that Vietnam's been kind of exchanged hands quite a few times over its history, and it's not really had long periods of autonomy. But I really, I may be out on a limb there. I don't really know the whole story, but it certainly got me thinking about, Catholicism in a nation like Vietnam. And there's some developments of that. There's segments of a Vietnamese worship service, the communion, there's a funeral which has elements of Catholic, but perhaps more traditional Vietnamese, iconography as well. There's echoes of the Vietnam War. There's an interview that he has with a man who was a soldier in the South Vietnamese army who survived it, but talks about some of the incredible, hardships and life-threatening challenges he had to survive to get to this elderly point in life where he's at now. And then he runs into an old girlfriend, a former lover who has now become a nun. And he asks her some pointed questions about, why did she take the vows, and, what is her purpose of being here? And she's very, self-effacing. She does not want to answer those questions. And there's long, awkward pauses where he asks the question and she stands there silently thinking about her answer. And then she says, "I have to leave now." And she walks away. It's like, okay. There's another interview with an elderly woman who kind of gives a little bit of her philosophy of life. And so you see these exchanges, these encounters, and they're raising those kind of eternal questions that people have about purpose and meaning and God's will and sovereignty. And is there a divine being who is interested in the details of our lives, and do the tragic and terrible things that we experience happen for a reason, or is it just kind of some chaotic process that we're involved in, and there's really not a lot we can do about it, so we just have to fend for ourselves and hope for the best and endure it the best we can? Those are the types of questions that Inside the Yellow Cocoon Shell is raising, but I feel like they don't give much of a payoff. There's a lot of, I don't know, kind of, or a lot of silence, or there's just a kind of an elusive, or even I'd say evasive quality to some of the questions that are being asked. But because it's presented with this profundity and kind of gravity and seriousness, it feels maybe like the director has bitten off a little bit more than he could chew. What he's presenting as kind of the meaningful, exchanges when a character speaks their truth, without sounding too condescending, they seem like platitudes to me. And so I feel like he could have maybe done a little bit better to beef up the script, because while that might be how people really come down and answer their questions, if you're going to raise these lofty subjects, you better deliver. So I'm going to play the trailer, give you a chance to take a look at how the film presents itself.
Vậy, Đức ghi là gì vậy chú?
Ở lớp học, con có bao giờ cho bạn mượn đồ chơi chưa?
Dạ rồi.
Lúc con cho mượn, con có nghĩ bạn đã trả lại cho con không?
Dạ có.
Thì đức tin nó cũng giống như vậy đấy.
Em có quan hệ gì với nạn nhân?
Dạ, chị Hạnh là chị dâu của em. Dạ, con muốn gặp sơ phụ trách ở đây.
Anh cần tìm sơ phụ trách có việc gì không?
Con muốn gửi thằng cháu. Anh không thể hiểu nổi ý định mầu nhiệm này. Nó nói là vì nếu có, sẽ không để những chuyện như thế này xảy ra.
cuộc sống vĩnh cửu. Sao có thời buổi nào mà mày còn mê tín dữ vậy? Sao nãy giờ mày im vậy? Mày nói gì với nó đi.
Sự tồn tại của đức tin nó thật là mơ hồ.
Mày lại giống nó nữa rồi.
Nghĩ đến thời gian rất ngắn ngủi của đau khổ mà đem so sánh với sự vĩnh cửu thì nó là một khoảnh khắc ngắn không là gì hết.
Honestly, the trailer is concise, gets to the point, it creates the atmosphere, and I think, makes the movie look a little bit more satisfying perhaps than it actually is. I have seen some very positive reviews of this film. I've seen some incredibly negative, like 1 star, most boring thing I've ever seen in my life, nothing happens, indulgent, pretentious. I mean, you can imagine the whole smorgasbord of insults and dismissive comments, and I'm not going to go there. I just feel like, maybe this is a director who is worth keeping an eye on. Some of the compositions are striking and beautiful, and if you just want to get a sense of life in Vietnam in 2022, 2023, when this film was being made, that's pretty fascinating. I definitely enjoyed just kind of the sociological aspect of it, of just kind of seeing some of these villages, and there's some nice long extended takes where you're kind of on roads through the town and back in the country and running into herds of water buffalo and kind of interesting stuff like that. But does it all add up to a compelling cinematic experience to justify 3 hours of runtime? I will not say that it does. And so in that sense, I will come up with a bit of a negative review there, but not out of, hatred or disrespect for what he's trying for. I just feel like maybe a little bit more discipline in the editing room, whittle it down. Don't try to present it as such a profound commentary on the nature of existence, and you might have yourself a much more digestible and accessible film. So, Inside the Yellow Cocoon Shell, which has to do with butterflies, and some nice scenes of big flocks of butterflies doing their thing. So there is some beauty here, but it could have been better.